Hello, lovelies, and welcome back to An Angel's Life of Bookish Goodness. And today I am going to be doing a 3 books that have a special meaning for you book tag. And I saw this over on JB Taylor's page. I will put the links to his page in the comments below so you can check it out and follow along with this pretty cool tag. First book I have is The Eye of the Hunter by Dennis L. McKiernan. And this was the first real introduction I got to high fantasy. And I know that's horrible. Everybody else got to read Tolkien. But this was the one I read before I read Tolkien. And I absolutely loved it. Ryatha, who's one of the main characters, she's an elf, and she sort of represented to me the kind of woman that I wanted to be. One of the reviewers said that I flipped gender roles on their heads with my characters, and I didn't do it intentionally, and I think it's interesting that that's what they noticed, because my earliest introduction to that, besides my mother, was from this book. And it's interesting that I based my characters, Fury and Havoc, off of my husband and I, and our relationship and the nature of how we operate together is very similar to how Ryatha and Aravan interact in Hunters. So for those of you who haven't read it, you should go get it. The next book that had a lot of meaning for me growing up was Watership Down by Richard Adams. And I read this in 7th or 8th grade, and I borrowed it from my sister. And up until that point, most of my reading had been science fiction and fantasy, and I didn't think that I liked anything else. I did some dabbling with Nancy Drew, wasn't super impressed. I really found my niche in reading high fantasy and some science fiction. But my sister Kelly, we were visiting her for holidays, and it was on her bookshelf, and she really strongly recommended it. And so I ended up picking it up, and talk about a tearjerker. I've probably read this book 20 times over the years, and every single time I read it, I cry. So that sent me on a whole adventure. I devoured a ton of her books. I read some Stephen King at her house. I read Of Mice and Men at her house, and it opened up a whole other world of books for me to read, which included the Louis L'Amour Jubal Sackett series. This one meant a lot to me because I was born and raised in Montana until I was about 12. And then we moved away from Montana. And this brought me back to the mountains, and it brought me back home. And I had a really hard time when I moved to South Carolina because the culture was very different. And so being able to, in a way, escape back to my roots was an incredible thing that really helped make that experience living in the South a little bit easier to bear. And so I absolutely love that. Also, Louis L'Amour is, in his words, a storyteller, and his editors do all the extra work, but that really comes across in his stories. He has this, sitting around the campfire style of telling stories, and I absolutely love it. So those are the 3 books that influenced my reading and my love of books, and more importantly, my love of different genres, opening up lots of different doors. For those of you who have followed me for a while now, you know that I read pretty much any genre. Just depends on the mood that I'm in, and it's because of those different influences right there. I hope you enjoyed this. I am going to throw out a couple tags. I'm still trying to decide who I want to tag with this, but I will add those in the comments below. And if you decide to do the 3 books that most influenced your reading, be sure to link your video in the comments below, and I'll be happy to go check that out. Thanks so much, and until next time, keep reading.